After returning to Fulu Town, I had a quick discussion with Song Changjing, the king of Dali Domain. The old ape of Zhengyang Mountain didn't stay in Li's house for too long. The old man still returned to where he had punched before, carefully observing the depth of the boy's footprints on the mud. In addition, there are a series of faint footprints of adults in the old ape's field of vision. The old ape guessed that most of them were left by the young Jianshu and Feng Leiyuan when he punched the young man in the mud bottle alley. That person clearly wanted to take advantage of the fire. There was a moment of sword chi overflowing, although it was fleeting and hidden deep. But the old ape has experienced hundreds of battles, and he has practiced for thousands of years in Zhengyang Mountain where sword chi crosses and breaks the treasure bottle. I am too familiar with Jianqi and Jian and Ten. This Zhengyang Mountain guardian ape has lived for too long, so he has seen too much. He has seen sword immortals who are good at raising high-quality flying swords. Among them, there are dozens of exquisite and pocket-sized flying swords, all of which are as small as a fine hair. I have also seen the natal flying sword as big as a mountain peak, and the river was cut off when the sword fell. After the old ape pondered, he continued to move forward. After entering the mountain, there were first weeds and then a bamboo forest. The ground was mostly dead leaves accumulated in the autumn and winter last year, but because it was closest to the town, the bamboo forest did not appear barren and messy. Following the imperceptible footprints all the way, the old ape found that he was about to walk out of the bamboo forest. The old ape did not directly walk out of the bamboo forest, but looked around and did not see the footprints of the teenager on the ground. He looked up, and there were no obvious marks on the green bamboo around, but the old ape still did not go straight to the mountain to chase, but rose up from the ground, stepped on the upper end of a thick and strong green bamboo, slightly increased the strength, leaned towards the mountain. The bamboo bent, and when it was about to collapse, the old man suddenly dissipated, and his burly body was like a light feather, without any weight. The green bamboo that was under the burden suddenly rebounded and returned to straight. The old man stood on the top of the shushu green bamboo like a fairy Yufeng. His figure swayed slightly with the bamboo. After looking around, he lowered his head and looked down at the surroundings. Finally, the old ape found clues and pulled the corners of his mouth, looking all the way to the left-hand side. After listening carefully, I vaguely heard the sound of flowing water. The old ape sneered. As expected, he is as cunning as ever. The old ape stepped on the green bamboos and ran to the stream on the left. I didn't know how many bamboos were broken along the way. After arriving at the stream, the boy with straw sandals was asked whether he would go along the stream to the deep mountains and forests or flee downstream. The old ape was a little uncertain for a while. The old ape was squatting by the river, his brows furrowed, and he was a little resentful. If he was in the outside world, as long as it was a mountain with a little spiritual energy, the old ape could just grab the land god who had lost his backing and forcibly ordered him out, asked to know where the boy is going. This is also one of the natural supernatural powers of the moving mountain ape. Otherwise, other cultivators, let your spells reach the sky and have a great reputation, and they will definitely not be able to easily point fingers at the gods of water and soil. It is also difficult for Sheng Shu to yell at a small household member, Wailang, asking him to do this and that. The most important thing is that this Minister of War and member Wailang are not above the temples of a country, listening to the sound of the water. The old ape fell into deep thought. According to common sense, percent of the young man is the skill and physical strength that he has sharpened since he was a child. Maybe he has studied the techniques of shallow breathing and breathing, which is why he has a physique that is different from ordinary people, so that you can play the game of cat and mouse with the old ape on the roof of the alley. In this case, it is reasonable to hide in the deep forest where you are familiar with the road. If you are a pure teenager, you just wanted revenge with a passion and tasted it. After reaching the level of seriousness, it gradually cooled down and naturally began to be afraid. So he ran to the blacksmith shop in the south to seek the protection of Master Ruin, which is also reasonable. The former is just time-consuming. The latter is labor-intensive, and even consumes the incense of Zhengyang Mountain. The old ape followed his heart and blurted out, "This young man must die." After saying this, the old ape no longer had any doubts and chose to track down the stream. In the south of the town, there is a yellow mud road, winding and twisting. On both sides are the rice fields and crops of the people of the town. Halfway down the road, there is a small dilapidated temple with white walls and black tiles. It is said to be a temple, but it is actually a place for people to rest in different places, especially in busy farming seasons, hot summer seasons, or rainstorms. It makes a world of difference whether there is shade or not. At this time, Chen Pingan and Ning Yao discussed and rested here. Ning Yao was born with a clear mind, and he could see things easily at night. He found that the dilapidated walls were full of children's charcoal graffiti. Most of them were people's names. Dai, just a little higher. There are also some clearly visible names. Song Jixin, Jiggy, Zhao Yao, Xie Shi, Cao Xi. There is a long list. It is estimated that they were riding on the neck back then, or even standing, written on the shoulder of the little friend. Ning Yao even saw the names of Liu Xianyang, Chen Pingan, and Gu Chan, gathered in the highest place in the upper left corner. Not very gregarious. Ning Yao retracted his gaze and asked, "Anyway, the first step is done, and the old ape has been forced to take a breath for the first time. Next, do you really want to go to the town to retrieve the wooden bow? Will it be too risky? In case the old ape was very cautious and didn't go up the mountain to find you trouble, Wouldn't you be a sheep in the tiger's mouth? The straw shoe boy has been exhaling and exhaling silently. The length of his breathing is not fixed. It all depends on the feeling. He pursues the most comfortable state. It was a waste of time before, and I shot an arrow at the old ape in the mud bottle alley. It is indeed like Miss Ning, even at such a close distance, as long as I did not hit the old ape's eyeball. The damage is negligible. Ning Yao was a little annoyed. I told you earlier, those tricks of yours won't work. You didn't believe it before, and you didn't listen to persuasion. Okay, I'll let you do it. But now that you believe it, you should follow my way, right? In fact, as for how to deal with the old ape in Zhengyang Mountain, the teenagers and girls who were discussing the matter at the covered bridge at the time decided to do their own thing. Chen Pingyan just let the girl wait for him to return to the town to find the 3 people. But the teenager behind him suddenly changed his mind. Catch up with Ning Yao before Ning Yao walks to the north end of the covered bridge and goes down the steps. After that, there were huge differences between the two. The girl with the sword and a sword was very firm at the beginning. Yu Chen Pingyan is not a practitioner, and you don't even know how to use the fist. She came to kill the old ape to avenge Lu Xianyang and vent her hatred. But when Chen Ping'an asked her how to kill the old ape, Ning Yao was reluctant to say anything, only said that she had the ability to press the bottom of the box, walk the world, go up and down the mountain, walk alone on the road, and how to do it without the family's trump card. Chen Ping'an did not answer. Only after this, Chen Ping'an searched for someone 3 times. Chen Ping'an stood up, twisted his waist, barely hindered the stagnation, got up and said, "I have almost rested." Ning Yao was surprised. The things from the Yang family shop are so useful. Chen Ping'an's eyes darkened for a moment, but he nodded quickly and said with a smile, "It's very useful." Ning Yao asked, "Will the old ape see through your escape route directly?" Chen Ping'an thought for a while and replied cautiously, "Maybe it can." Ning Yao used the scabbard to draw 2 circles and a straight line on the ground and asked, "This is the route between Xiao Miao and Li's house on Fulu Street. Where is your wooden bow hidden?" Chen Ping'an squatted down and drew a circle. "Near the east, almost here. Not too far from Mud Bottle Alley." Ning Yao nodded and said, "Okay, even if the old ape comes directly to the small temple, I will delay his footsteps and buy you enough time." Chen Ping'an drew a small circle with his finger in the middle of the line again. "If this is the worst situation, Miss Ning, can you seduce him here? It's where I entered the mountain, so it won't take long to rush over to the wooden bow." The girl in a dark green robe leaned on the ground with a knife and said proudly, "Maybe I will take the old ape's head and go to your side at that time." Chen Ping'an shook his head and said, "Don't be brave. Be careful. Ning Yao can't wait to hit the head with the scabbard." "Who is it?" She stared and said, "Hey, the person standing in front of you is me, Ning Yao, the future #1 sword immortal in the world." "Okay." The teenager stood up and looked down at the 2 cloth bags around his waist, just in case. After tying them again, he raised his head and smiled. I know. So, then don't die in such a small place. Otherwise, thanks to you. In the future, when you become such a big man, as a friend, I will be dazzled," Ning Yao said with emotion. Chen Ping'an, "You are so indecisive as a mother-in-law, and mother, I advise you not to marry a daughter-in-law in the future. Just find a woman to marry." The boy snorted without refuting. Just as he was about to leave the temple, Ning Yao said, "I'll take you to Shaoxi first, and then I'll walk a distance northwest to prevent the old ape from worrying about the safety of the little girl and going out. It didn't take long for you to go to the bamboo forest, but because I didn't find any trace of you, I decided to give up the pursuit and turned around and returned to the town." Chen Ping'an thought about it and did not refuse. The boys and girls ran to the creek together, and the girls breathed and breathed like a big river. The water was deep and silent, and the undercurrent was surging. The youth's breathing is like a stream of water, and the water runs long. Weather varies. Ning Yao suddenly couldn't help but ask, "Wooden bow and arrow smeared the herb you said. Is it really useful?" The boy replied, "Anyway, it is useful for wild boars weighing more than 200 catties, and it should also be useful for that old ape." Ning Yao stopped talking. The 2 approached the creek, which was where the straw shoe boy landed at that time. The boy and girl kicked the ground with the soles of their feet almost at the same time, stood up high, and jumped to the opposite bank. After the girl landed, she held the scabbard and slowed her pace, while the boy sprinted to take off, leaped across the river, and ran to the ground. "Small town, leave me alone." The teenager continued to move forward, turning his head to remind him while running, "I will turn around a little and pick a secluded alley to enter the town, maybe a little later." Ning Yao nodded, and after Chen Ping'an disappeared, he stopped holding the hilt of the sword and started walking slowly westward. Not long after, the girl stopped and squinted at the distant stream upstream. A burly figure suddenly shot from the big rock in the stream to the north bank and landed more than 20 steps in front of the girl, domineering. The old ape was a little puzzled. There was no hidden aura of a teenager around him. He glanced at the white sheathed longsword around the girl's waist intentionally or unintentionally, and said with a smile, "Little girl, the person who went to Fulu Street to make troubles was you, right?" The girl held the hilt of the sword with both hands and remained silent. The old ape asked curiously, "Little girl, on the way to the town before, although you have been hiding your head and tail, I know that your origin is not simple. Strange. What kind of grievance is there between you and me?" Why is there such a thing? Or that your family's mentor has a festival with Zhengyang Mountain without saying a word. Ning Yao unsheathed the sword around his waist at the same time, and his figure disappeared in a flash. The narrow knife came first and slashed at the ancestor who protected the mountain in Zhengyang Mountain. The girl took advantage of the situation to rotate and swept the horizontal sword toward the neck of the old ape. The old ape also smashed the sword edge with his arm. The girl's first two moves were unsuccessful, and she did not entangle herself closely. She kept a distance from the old ape and walked slowly, with his unparalleled body. The old ape judged the sharpness of the two weapons. He ignored the blood trough cut out on the outside of his arms, and said with a smile, "The weapons are really good, and I dare to carry two with me. It looks like it's on the mountain at first sight, a disciple of a 1,000-year-old family, or a direct descendant of a first-class noble family down the mountain. I almost thought you were another Fengleyuan sword cultivator hiding in the dark." The old ape moved with the girl's seemingly careless footsteps, followed her figure, and shifted his eyes slightly, and said solemnly, "Little girl, I know that even if you are frustrated next, you will still not give up. Then the old man will give you one last chance, allow you to report your family background, and then you will be killed by this old man again. And Zhengyang Mountain will not admit it, let alone where you come from or who you are under the tutelage." Ning Yao turned a deaf ear to this, and was always looking for the real weakness of this old ape. After all, she is not the Dali feudal king who has reached the threshold of the 10th realm, who can carry a mountain-moving ape head-on. The old ape, who admitted that he had given in too much, sneered, "If you are so ignorant of praise, then go with you." The old ape swept at least the girl in one step, raised his arms and clenched his fist at the girl's head, and slammed it down. The girl raised her green-sheathed knife to block. The blade pointed directly at the old ape's wrist. The long sword in her hand swiftly pierced the old ape's heart, and the tip of the sword pointed directly at a certain point in the old ape's heart. Unexpectedly, the roughness of the old ape's long arm swung down into 5 fingers dexterously grasping the blade. Obviously, the murderous murder is false, and it is true that the girl is tempted to rashly draw the sword. The mountain ape, who was born in the holy land of swordsmanship in Dongbao Pingzhou, can see the unusualness of the sword at a glance. For this reason, the old ape did not hesitate to replace the air machine for the second time. Even if the tip of the sword has been pushed into the skin of the old ape's chest, it is only an inch away from piercing the heart. Seeing that the opportunity was not good, Ning Yao still decisively released the hilt of the sword, and while pulling the knife vigorously, the blade of the knife slipped through the palm of the old ape, making a sound of gold and stone piercing the eardrum. After drawing the knife, the girl leaned back, kept her feet, and quickly backed away. Sure enough, the old ape turned sideways and threw the hand holding the tip of the sword back, throwing the long sword several dozen meters away. He kicked the girl. The girl originally held the sword and raised her right hand, but was kicked by the old ape, and with a loud bang, the girl was kicked and flew a distance of 7 or 8 meters. Her back fell heavily on the ground, and she rolled over a few times before she could do it, using the tip of the knife to lean on the ground. The tip of the knife was nailed into the road to a depth of 1 foot, which abruptly stopped the body from slipping. A bloody end. Without giving the girl a chance to breathe, a huge figure fell from the sky. This time, the girl didn't even have the extra movement to pull out the narrow knife, and she retreated again and again. The old ape did not chase the girl, but stood on the spot after landing, raised 1 foot high, stepped on the hilt of the knife inserted into the road, and when the girl knelt down on one knee and looked up, the old ape stepped down and stepped into the tunnel. The foot stomped the whole knife deep into the ground, and the handle of the knife was only level with the ground. There were strands of purple gold aura slowly flowing on the old ape's face, and it looked particularly dazzling in the dark night. He sneered, "You can also practice swords, and you can learn swords. It's neither a donkey nor a horse, and it's nondescript. It's such a pitiful end." The girl stood up and forcibly swallowed a mouthful of blood. "Are you all that capable?" The old ape shook his head and smiled. "I just gave you one more chance." Ning Yao took a deep breath and said solemnly, "In my hometown, in the battle of life and death, I never pay attention to who my parents are. As long as you have the ability to kill me in an upright manner, my skills are not as good as others. My parents will know the reason and process in the future. At most, it is to come to Dongbao Pingzhou to find you trouble, and it will never involve Zhengyang Mountain. So you can rest assured, just let go and fight." This was the first time the old ape heard the girl so talkative and eloquent, which was very different from the unsmiling girl in the hood and her impression. So when the old ape's neck became cold for a moment, he suddenly measured his head. A white rainbow brushed past his neck, and the sword's edge brought out a knot-deep wound. If you don't turn your head, even if you can't penetrate the old ape's neck in one breath, it will definitely be considered a serious injury. At that time, the boat will capsize in the real gutter, and you will make a wrong step. When you think about it, once you reveal your true body too early, you will be stunned, losing the moral commanding heights. There is no room for bargaining with Qi Jingchun and Master Ron. It is impossible to implicate his own young lady, and Fang Tiandi is alone and bearing various crises. This Zhengyang Mountain old ape is finally angry for the 3rd time. The flying sword was not sheathed, but circled around the girl and spun quickly, asking for credit to please its master. After seeing this scene, the old ape laughed in anger, and he laughed, Okay, I just had a bad fight with Song Changjing, and then I'll play with you. It's just that you know how many pounds of flesh you have. Can withstand a few heavy beatings. The girl carefully observed the purple gold aura on the old ape's face. Her brows were slightly wrinkled. It was only 3 times more than expected. The embankment of the cave collapsed, and he was forced to cast his true body. Moreover, the death of a longevity is extremely fatal to the human monks under the upper 5 realms. And of course, it hurts a mountain ape, but at the same time, it is not as deadly as other humans. The girl's fingers moved slightly, and the longsword swayed lightly, and smiled. No wonder my father said that your Zhengyang Mountain in East Treasure Pingzhou is not worth mentioning. The old ape was all hair and beard, and shouted angrily, looking for death? Killed the girl who didn't know the heights of the sky. Ning Yao did not love to fight, and ran to the north. There were dangers along the way. If the flying sword had not acquired the 2 characters on the plaque of Qichong Bull, the sword's energy and divine will had skyrocketed at the same time, and the girl had a sympathy with the girl, and could go wherever she wanted. An unruly existence, which made the offensive of the old ape Thunderbolt to be obstructed again and again, and helped the master to escape by the slightest. If a sword cultivator has worked so hard to cultivate a lifelike thing, the old ape will not be surprised. But the old ape clearly perceives that the unsheathed longsword is definitely not the life of a strange girl. Flying sword. She is more like an ordinary warrior who walks the rivers and lakes, holding a magic weapon that is handy, and only requires that the blade is sharp enough. He has never walked the avenue of Jiangxu that warms and nurtures Jiangxin and nurtures the sword spirit. But the strange thing about the girl is that she is not completely a martial artist, because for the martial arts master who is dedicated to tempering her body, what she pursues is the world collapses and my body is immortal, a kind of fighting all the way. The reason why the old ape failed to capture the girl was not only because of the trouble with flying swords, but also because the girl had learned a lot, including sword cultivators, martial artists, and key cultivators. The old ape really couldn't figure out which sect in East Treasure Pingzhou could train such a strange junior, so he tried to test more and more carefully, trying to determine the origin of his roots. Anyway, as long as you don't get close to that town, no matter how mixed up there is, the old ape won't have any worries here. The face of the girl who was running around became paler. The end of the crossbow. The old ape smiled wickedly, not to mention whether you can survive until you escape back to the town. Even if you are lucky enough to be successful and someone will answer. Do you really think that the old man can't kill you? The old ape plucked the green onion from the dry land, and did not care too much about the flying sword. He jumped directly over the girl's head and landed on her way. He turned around and blocked the girl's way to the north. Feijian, swooping in an instant, and stabbed at the old ape's head again. When the old ape tried to find an opportunity to grab the flying sword and imprison it in the palm of his hand, it retreated cunningly without knowing what to do, never reluctant to fight. The flying sword came and went like the wind is hard to guard against, no matter how rough the old ape is. He is not afraid of being injured, but he is also a little embarrassed. The girl did not want to go straight ahead to confront the old monkey, so she inclined her course and ran to the northeast. The old ape moved sideways, always intimidating the girl. The old ape slapped the flying sword that was rushing from the side with one palm, like a fly, and hit the flying sword 2 feet into the ground. The flying sword was like a woman twisting her waist. It was pulled out of the ground, hovering in the air. The tip of the sword trembled violently, like an angry wildcat, and soon swept towards the old ape again aggressively. The old ape didn't tire of it, and couldn't help asking, why can this flying sword ignore the commandments here? What is your relationship with Qi Jingchun or Ruan Qiong? Ning Yao was almost pressed by the palm of the old ape on his forehead. While leaning back, he stretched out his hand to hold the hilt of the flying sword, and was pulled out of the palm of the old ape. The man dragged an arm and slid back, after being pulled away by Feijian. The girl didn't take the opportunity to retreat into the town for some reason, but stopped, stood up straight, tilted her head, and spat out a mouthful of blood. Feijian hovered beside the girl, buzzing. It was a puzzled child, chatting with the elders over there, making a lot of noise. The girl pressed her left shoulder with her right hand. The old ape suddenly slowed down and laughed loudly. As expected, this flying sword that recognizes you as the master can indeed not follow the rules. But the flying sword is just a flying sword after all, and it is still not as small as it is to open up the profound spirituality. Girl, you come to command it. But unfortunately, your body and soul have been severely injured in the town and have not recovered, so that you can't bear to control it at all. So it has been intermittent, and the attack is independent of it. Anyway, you never thought about it. If you really hurt the old man, it's just a defensive move to save your life. You have to control the flying sword with your heart. The girl finally spoke again. You talk too much. Her lips were scarlet. Her face was snow white, and she was wearing a dark green robe in the middle of the night. The girl looks like a ghostly female ghost who travels in the village at night. The old ape walked forward step by step. There is a good sword in the air, but my body is weak in strong branches. It's really pitiful. You and the alley boy did everything possible to get the old man to breathe, so as to attract this party. Heaven and earth's counterattack. Little girl. Now you might as well guess. Wait for the old man to use up the third breath, and put on the next breath. Will it provoke the wrath of the earth, and whether the old man can withstand that? Seawater flooding in the field. The girl suddenly smiled playfully, tapped her toes, and jumped back. No more than a zhang? Nowhere near half a zhang? The old ape who wanted to chase was somewhat inexplicable. For fear of cheating, he continued to walk slowly, making up his mind to wait and see what happened. Then the girl who vacated her body turned her toes a little more. This time, her toes were slightly stronger, and her ankles were twisted. So instead of jumping straight back, she jumped to the right. It turned out that without waiting for the girl to fall, the flying sword swept the foot of at least the girl who was at the highest point in the air, so the girl used precise force every time, and continued to retreat and hide. Even the old ape, who has experienced vicissitudes of life, was a little stunned. The scene in front of him was strange and funny. The girl was like a little elk jumping on a grid, jumping one after another, full of light and agile breath, and soon disappeared into the night sky, probably because he was worried that the old ape was making a sneak attack halfway through. And the girl's jumping seemed extremely unstructured, suddenly left and right, high and low, front and back. The old ape twitched the corners of his mouth and said with complicated eyes, "What an antelope with horns." However, the old ape didn't watch the girl escape in the distance. With a tiptoe, he picked up a stone at will, held it in the palm of his hand, and smashed it violently into the air. The stones were quickly picked out of the ground by the old ape, and finally rolled away in the hands of the old ape with the momentum of wind and thunder. Although most of the stones were lost, there were still 7 or 8 stones that posed a great threat to the girl, forcing her to use the flying sword to smash the flying stones. There was a roar in the night sky, like a spring thunder blooming. The old ape looked gloomy. The girl was either insane, or she was stubborn, and she could control the flying sword in one breath, pulling it up to the sky where the flying stone was weak. However, she maintained roughly at a certain height, like a light cavalry roaming around the edge of the battlefield, enticing the enemy bowmen to continuously consume their arrows and physical strength. Before you know it, you are approaching the west side of the town. The old ape roughly weighed the remaining breath, and there was not much left. He specially provoked 2 stones as big as a child's fist, one in each hand. One foot stepped forward, the other arm stretched out. The bulging muscles bulged high, shocking. The place where the flying stone broke through the air in his hand actually squeaked, mixed with a long string of sparks, different from usual. Like a slender fire dragon rising into the sky, the old ape shouted, "Get down." High in the sky, a splendid electric light lit up, followed by the explosion of spring thunder. The girl groaned, and the whole person began to fall. The flying sword twisted and twisted like a drunkard, whining and whimpering constantly, but still desperately rushing towards its master. The old ape didn't even look at the girl in Feijian. Instead, he narrowed his eyes and stared at the roof on the west side of the town. When a dark shadow was dispatched, the old ape stomped his other foot, and there was only 1 stone left in his hand, laughed happily and said, "The rescuer will die first." The girl vomited blood and shouted, "Don't come out." The girl, who was already seriously injured, couldn't bear to look at it. At that moment, she was a little desperate and struggled to hold the hilt of the sword. When one arm couldn't support it, she quickly changed hands to hold the sword. Ning Yao did not expect that it was her cleverness that killed the boy. The teenager wore straw sandals, carried a basket on his back, and tied a fish basket. Like the wind, he came and went in a hurry every day, busy making money and cooking medicine. Ning Yao felt that such a young man died like this, which is not right. After the girl staggered to the ground, she made a sword with her fingers together, pressed against her forehead and between her brows, and gritted her teeth. "Come out. Slash this world for me." There was a tiny golden line between the girl's eyebrows, gradually spreading from top to bottom. Like a fairy with open eyes, under the ancient arch bridge, in the present covered bridge, there was a rusty old sword blade that pointed to the water pool for thousands of years, like a person who woke up from a deep sleep and yawned. The rusted tip of the sword shook slightly, so the covered bridge shook. The whole stream also swayed. The whole small world also shook. In a deep mountain, Kijing Chun, who was busy with dust, came out of the mountain with several people. This teacher, who was walking leisurely on the mountain road, raised his foot and was about to step on it suddenly. He smiled and slowly settled down. The old Yang Tu in the backyard of the Yang family shop was sitting beside the oil lamp dozing off. After waking up, he knocked on the table with an old cigarette stick. Song Changjing, the king of the Dali domain, jumped and cursed at the official office for no reason. In a sword casting room at the blacksmith shop, Ron Kyung, who was in charge of beating, unexpectedly missed with a hammer, and the ponytail girl holding the sword was shocked. Makushwan, a young man from Xinghua Lane who was regarded as a fool by everyone, was lying on the roof looking at the night sky, suddenly sat up and was murderous. At this moment, a familiar voice sounded fiery, getting closer and closer. "Miss Ning, why are you standing so stupid?" "Run! I'm not dead. That's a piece of clothes I took off. It's not easy." "Why are you stupid?" The girl was already a little confused, and when the edict ceremony was about to be completed, she suddenly felt that the whole person was like a cloud in mist, and she carried it on her shoulders and ran into the alleys of the town. Ning Yao woke up immediately, and her body followed a certain boy's shoulder, constantly bumping up and down, a little uncomfortable, even more embarrassing. She was completely stunned. Huh. Today is just this chapter, but words. Qin Pingyan carried the girl all the way and ran wildly, running faster than before going up the mountain, like a flower thief who stole the golden girl. Ning Yao suffered a lot of internal injuries, which made him feel uncomfortable. But he didn't care about his face. If he punched the old ape at this time, It is estimated that she and Chen Ping'an would really sacrifice. Ning Yao's forehead was covered with sweat, and he asked, "How did you survive?" No stones were hit. How do you know that the old ape's backhand was aimed at you and not me? After asking a series of questions, Ning Yao suddenly woke up. Don't talk about this. Take advantage of the old ape's need to breathe. How far can he run? I have let the sword entangle the old ape as much as possible, but I guess it won't last long. The straw shoe boy nodded lightly, walked like a fly, and walked through the alleys, like a fish swimming at the bottom of a stream. After getting away from the small street to the west of the town, Chen Ping'an still kept walking, and took the time to explain in a low voice, "Before in Mud Bottle Alley, the old ape was triggered by me into the roof of a dilapidated house, and then he fell into the pit. I went, and then I secretly lost a small broken tile on the house next to the hole. Sure enough, the old ape thought it was me who was not careful and leaked the sound of footsteps. It made me break out in a cold sweat. I actually just had the cat on the roof over there. I didn't dare to show my head, because I was afraid that you would be distracted, and I was wondering if I could give the old ape an arrow. And then I saw the stone that the old ape smashed you down, followed by a fire. It hung like a snake in the sky, and I guessed that as long as I looked up, everyone in our town could see it. How dare I take it lightly? At that time, I took another turn in my mind, thinking that if it were me, I would definitely use you as the bait. First hit the one hiding in the dark, then turn around to clean up the bright one. One bait is strung with 2 fish. How good, right? So I took off Liu Shanyang's clothes first and threw it out before I dared to rescue you." Ning Yao's eyes lit up, and he was amazed, and then inexplicably began to settle accounts after the autumn. Chen Ping'an, who did you learn these curvy intestines from? With a sanctimonious appearance, it must not be so honest on the surface. Say it. The time Lu Doran rescued me. In your ancestral home in Mud Bottle Lane. Apart from taking off the curtain cap, did you take advantage of me by taking this opportunity? Chen Ping'an was at a loss for a while, as if he was thrown in the face by an ox's tail when he was a child. What? The girl did not continue to ask for guilt, but instead laughed to herself. Chen Ping'an is a money fan? Definitely not a color embryo. Ning Yao was convinced of this. Just like she always believed that she would become a great sword immortal in the future, Ning Yao whispered, "Put me down." Chen Ping'an asked, "Can you walk by yourself?" Ning Yao said helplessly, "I can't leave for the time being. But if you keep running like this, my heart, liver, spleen, and stomach will be smashed by you. I didn't get beaten to death by the fist of the old ape, but ended up hanging on your shoulders like pork. The old ape must not be laughed to death by us." Chen Ping'an slowed down and said with a headache, "What should I do? Find a place nearby to hide. I originally wanted to leave the town, and that place is not easy to find." Ning Yao suddenly remembered something, and asked curiously, "Where's your homemade wooden porcelain armor? Why didn't you wear it on your body?" Chen Ping'an smiled bitterly. "It's not meaningful to deal with the old ape, but it will affect my running speed. So I just take it off. It's a shame. Otherwise, I don't know how to take you away from there. And I can't carry it. I can't carry it on my back, let alone hug it. It's a headache, just thinking about it." Ning Yao sighed and said with determination, "Chen Ping'an, let me down first, and then carry me to the place you said." Chen Ping'an naturally had no objection. He did it without any hesitation. He carried the girl on his back and continued to run. He asked, "Miss Ning, where is your sword? Why is there only a scabbard?" The girl hugging the boy's neck said angrily, "Buried in the soil." Chen Ping'an didn't ask any more questions, and ran to an inaccessible place outside the town. In the wilderness, surrounded by tombs that have long since been worshipped by descendants, the tombs are overgrown with weeds and lush like a vegetable garden. From time to time, there will be a few calls of night owls, one after another, which is really scary. Fortunately, Chen Ping'an had a feeling about this place that his peers did not have, but he didn't feel any discomfort. After about a stick of incense, Chen Ping'an carried the girl on his back and walked through the collapsed statues of countless broken limbs, and went around to a huge statue. Behind the statue, the clay statue was dumped on the ground. For some reason, the head was no longer there, and the body was more than 2 feet long. One can imagine how majestic this statue once sat in the ancestral temple. Chen Ping'an squatted down and tried to put Ning Yao down first. As a result, she didn't move after waiting for a while, which scared Chen Ping'an to think that Miss Ning had died on the way. Just when Chen Ping'an was sluggish on the spot as if struck by lightning and could not say a word, he fell asleep comfortably along the way. The girl from the past finally woke up, subconsciously wiped the corner of her mouth with the back of her hand, and asked confusedly, "Arrived?" At this moment, the young man squatting on the ground couldn't even figure it out himself, and almost burst into tears anyway. The boy quickly took a deep breath and restrained his strange emotions. He gently released the girl's legs with both hands, turned his head and smiled and said, "This is a hut I built temporarily last fall. I used to bring Guchan here to play." He shouted, "To toss." I cut some branches with a hatchet to build a shelf, and then covered it with leaves and grass. Ning Yao stood up straight and looked back. Feijian didn't return in a hurry. This is a good sign. At least it means that the old ape didn't find the direction of where the two were hiding. Chen Ping'an asked Ning Yao to wait for a while, and took the lead in bending over to enter the temporary nest made of wood and grass. Ning Yao sat in the small nest that was not too narrow and cramped. Relieved, Chen Ping'an did not close the rough wooden door, but sat at the door with his back to the girl. Ning Yao asked, "Why didn't you close the door?" Chen Ping'an shook his head and said, "If the old ape finds this place, there will be no difference." Ning Yao, who was sitting cross-legged, nodded and said, yes. After a moment of silence, Ning Yao asked, you don't have anything to ask? Chen Ping'an really asked. Did the old ape take 3 breaths? Ning Yao hummed, but tell you about a bad brook. The old ape can break the rules at least one more time. It's probably more than enough to deal with the 2 of us injured. Chen Ping'an asked again, Miss Ning, how much do you think Lao Pei paid for this? The small nest is filled with the fragrance of green grass infiltrating all around, which is refreshing. Although the ground is a little damp, the girl feels that she can't ask for more. Ning Yao thought about it carefully. The old ape made a total of 3 shots. The first time from your Niping Lane to the westernmost part of the town, the old ape was more reserved, mainly to test whether you have a backer. After all, he was afraid that someone would be there. The behind-the-scenes layout is afraid that someone will target the little master of Zhengyang Mountain that he escorted here. So the lifespan is only about 3 to 5 years, and then I confronted me by the stream. About 20 years. The third time, estimated at least 50 years. For the next 4th time, it will take 100 years to start. Chen Ping's eyes were shining. He bent down and reached out to pull out a piece of grass, brushed off the dirt, chewed it in his mouth, and said happily, even if it's been 180 years, it's a big profit. Even if you don't consider the frame of the woman surnamed Kai in Yunxia Mountain, ordinary people only live 60 years, so I earned 2 lives back. Besides, the old ape will live nearly 200 years in exchange for my 3 lives. I think he will die of anger when he thinks about it. Ning Yao frowned and said, Chen Ping'an, do you think your life is worthless? Chen Ping'an said without hesitation. Compared with the immortals and monsters that have lived for thousands of years, I am a commoner from a small-town kiln worker. Naturally. It is worthless? It is not a shame to admit this kind of thing. Ning Yao was panicked by Chen Ping'an's fallacies. Chen Ping'an turned his head and smiled. Of course, thinking of this, and resigning to my fate, I will still feel aggrieved. You think, why is my life worthless by nature? Ning Yao was about to agree, and then showed him a few words of sage mantras that were both heroic and knowledgeable. Unexpectedly, the young man quickly gave the answer himself, and asked himself seriously, did I do less good deeds in my past life? But I haven't had time to do good deeds in my life, so in my next life, I'll be finished. What should I do? Ning Yao picked up the empty green scabbard lying on his leg, and gently tapped the boy's back with the scabbard tip. The straw shoe boy suddenly grinned and turned his head with a look of anger that dared not speak. Ning Yao stared and said, this life is not over yet. What are you thinking about in the next life? Chen Ping'an quickly stretched out a finger to signal Ning Yao not to make a loud noise. The girl quickly shut up. Chen Ping'an moved his butt out, trying to stay away from the girl and the scabbard. Ning Yao hesitated to speak, but finally decided to tell the boy the truth, and said in a hoarse voice, Chen Ping'an, have you ever thought about how long this mountain-protecting ape from Zhengyang Mountain could have lived, even though his lifespan has been reduced by 180 years? The boy, who turned his back to the girl and looked at the sky in the distance, just shook his head. How can a young man know such a mysterious thing? It is estimated that he can't guess the answer even if he breaks his head. Some things are like the bluestone streets of Fulu Street and Taoye Alley. If the young man is not delivering letters, he will never know that the roads under the world are not all dirt roads. Ning Yao sighed and said, the remnants of this kind of ferocious beast born from the phenomena of heaven and earth have far less holes than us humans, although it is extremely difficult to practice because of this. The advantage is that the passage of energy and spirit is also slower, making it extremely difficult to cultivate. Longevity ranges from 500 years to 5,000 years. The mountain-moving ape is naturally active and does not like to be quiet. If there is no practice, the lifespan will not be too long. Naturally, it is not as good as the turtles. But the mountain-moving ape is the overlord of the past after all. The lifespan is still about 2,000 years old, and this mountain-protecting ape has obviously cultivated Taoism's supernatural power once he enters the 5th realm, plus his 9th realm physique, let alone 3,000 years. It will be 4,000 years. Years. It's not impossible. Ning Yao looked at the thin back. So don't think you have enough. Chen Ping'an was silent. Ning Yao felt a little sad. 2 were speechless, and the girl who had broken through the secrets gradually felt some guilt in her heart. So she searched for words, thinking about comforting the guy. But when Ning Yao thought his head was big, he heard a slight snoring from the straw shoe boy. And in BSP, Ning Yao was dumbfounded. A big house deep in Xinghua Alley was kept clean from the inside out, and even the road in front of the courtyard was much tidier than other people's houses. An old woman who had absolutely no relationship with her kind face and eyes picked up the wick to make the lights in the house brighter, and then looked at her grandson full of doting and began to ramble on day after day, year after year. I ran in the middle of the night again. What are you doing on the roof? As the old saying goes, the spring covers the autumn and you don't listen to persuasion. It's just when the body is growing and the root of the disease is really going to freeze. So how can grandma live? The silly boy grinned after the old woman sat down. She sighed and began to read her own hard-to-read scriptures. My dear grandson, don't you know that during the daytime, the white-eyed wolf didn't know what the smell of meat was, and suddenly he carried big bags and small bags of gifts came to the door. You were not at home at the time. You didn't see his face. You were really filial to your son and kind father. and you almost moved your grandma to cry. When she said this, the old woman was full of ridicule and suddenly spit out a mouthful of thick phlegm on the ground. She felt a little regretful, so she hurriedly crushed it with her toes. The old woman raised her head and looked at the indifferent young man. I just couldn't bear to fight. So I said angrily, "Heartless brat, I don't know how to feel bad for grandma. Your real name is Ma Xuan, but you have a father and no mother to raise it. It's a bitter word. If you think it's bad luck, you can change it yourself in the future. It doesn't matter. Don't care about grandma's thoughts. Grandma is an old country woman, a toad in the field, short-sighted, and deserves to suffer and suffer for a lifetime." The old woman began to wipe away her tears. The young Ma Kouchouan stretched out his hand and placed it on the back of the old woman's skinny and dry hand. The old woman glanced at her grandson, and there was finally some emotion in the boy's eyes. She smiled with relief and patted the back of Ma Kouchouan's hand in turn. "Grandma, I am an unlucky person. Your grandfather has a conscience and no ability. It's unreliable. My son has the ability but no conscience, and it's still unreliable. So you are the only thing left. If you don't have any prospects, grandma has suffered so much in her life. It's all in vain. Suffering is nothing. Don't do it like grandma. You must be successful in the future. Have great prospects. Who has bullied you? You bully you back to death? Don't be a good person and a bad person. It's okay to be a few times occasionally. Don't focus on eating enough. Just keep on doing harm. And be careful with retribution. Right? God likes to take naps all year round. But there are always times when you open your eyes. If you get caught. Oh, these old sesame and rotten millet saying. The teenagers heard the big ones since childhood. It is estimated that the ears have become cocoons instead of talking, but they have been replaced by several cocoons. It's just that the boy never retracted his hand, letting his grandmother hold it gently. The old woman asked abruptly, "Why do you like that little bitch of Jigui?" The young man smiled and said, "It looks good." The old woman patted the back of Ma Kouchouan's hand a little harder and cursed, "You little rotten maggot with no conscience. Even grandma won't tell the truth here." The teenager smiled. "Grandma, don't worry. It's a good thing." The old woman was skeptical, so she suppressed this question for the time being and changed the subject. "Do you know why your parents don't want you?" The boy smiled and said, "The family was poor at that time and couldn't afford to support me." The old woman suddenly raised her voice and screamed, "Poor, the 7 or 8 generations of the Ma family are really not the door of the poor. That is, they are used to pretending to be grandsons. And in the end, even the uncle doesn't know how to be a grandfather. In fact, the ancestor stayed the next ancestral instruction. No matter how rich you are, you can't put your house on Fulu Street or Taoye Lane. Your parents who deserve to be struck by lightning. If they are poor, can they wear gold and silver every day? A delicious meal and a spicy drink? Except for not daring to move to a place where 4 surnames and 10 ethnic groups live together? What kind of good things have they left behind?" Every time she talked about her son and daughter-in-law, the old woman really hated her teeth and sneered. "Those ancestors' rules are things that were buried in the soil and rotted into mud. How many years have passed? How much is it worth now? Grandson, don't take it too seriously. Grandma has lived for a long time, and she has seen a lot of rich and poor people. In the end, only those who are incompetent can be honest." Ma Kouchouan smiled brightly, and he didn't know whether he thought it was justified or he thought it was ridiculous. This young man has been like this since he was a child. He can suffer any loss and endure any bullying. But when he becomes stubborn, even his grandmother can't persuade him to listen. The old woman thought for a while, then got up and ran out to see if the courtyard door was locked. After returning to the house and taking a seat, she lowered her voice. "Grandson, don't watch grandma pretending to be a ghost for so many years. In addition to being a midwife, she just gives people a bowl of talisman water. It's not that I have the cheek to collect rubbish with others. But grandma tells you that those old things that are taken back are all precious treasures." The young man regained his lazy demeanor, and it was obvious that Ma Kouchouan was not interested in grandma's tattered big box. The old woman still recounted all kinds of tricks that were more deceptive in her early years, triumphantly. Ma Kouchouan suddenly asked, "Grandma, Chen Ping'an's father and Mud Pingxiang, did he die?" And the old woman's face changed drastically, and she quickly reached out to cover her grandson's mouth and said sternly, "There are some things that can be done, but not said." The young man smiled and nodded, no longer asking questions. After that, the old woman lost her interest in showing off her past glory. She was sick and heavy and looked out the window from time to time at the night scene. Ma Kouchouan asked with a smile, "Grandma, you have been a goddess in our town for so many years. The neighbors in Xinghua Lane. Everyone said that your old man can cross the gap between yin and yang and lead the dead back to the world." The old woman rolled her eyes and said, "Others believe in these smoky people. And you also believe in." Grandma is a person who is afraid of thunder. If she really wants to see a ghost, she doesn't have to scare herself to death. Don't be afraid. Grandma. The young Ma Kouchouan laughed softly. People and ghosts have different paths, and immortals are different. At dawn, Ning Yao in the grass, Ness slowly opened his eyes. There was no trace of the young man. She got up quickly, bent over and walked out. With her toes a little, she jumped over the huge shoulders of the dilapidated god statue lying on its side. In the distance, the young man with straw sandals was running towards the side, neither in a hurry nor slow, as if he was being chased and killed. When he saw the dark green girl, he quickly waved to her to come down. Ning Yao jumped off the shoulder of the Buddha statue and stood in front of the boy. "The old ape didn't find us here. After finishing speaking, Chen Pingyan faced the headless statue, put his hands together, bowed his head, thinking about it. Ning Yao vaguely heard the words begging not to blame her. She rolled her eyes, but said nothing. After that, Chen Pingyan whispered mysteriously, "I'll take you to see 2 statues. It's very interesting." Ning Yao asked, "It's the gods and bodhisattvas who showed their spirits and are willing to come out to see you. Isn't that since the heart is sincere?" Chen Pingyan said angrily. "Miss Ning, what you said." Ning Yao raised his brows. Chen Pingyan continued with lightning speed. "As soon as I hear it, I have read the book." Ning Yao changed his whole person in an instant, coughing a few times, thinking of restraint in his heart. The boy leads the way, and the girl silently follows behind. Ning Yao subconsciously stretched out a finger and rubbed his eyebrows. It's really on the line. The girl, heaven and man fought for a long time, took a deep breath, and then said 2 words weakly. "Thank you." In fact, the young man has been watching and listening to all directions, and naturally he heard the girl's sudden thanks. Although deep down, he didn't feel that she needed to thank him. But he should thank her. It's just that Chen Pingyan really didn't know how to speak, so he simply ignored it. Chen Pingyan suddenly stopped, stared at the south in a daze, and said to himself, "If the old ape has been deported by Mr. Qi, so he didn't chase us. What should we do?" The girl was speechless. Chen Pingyan continued to move forward, but he couldn't see anything out of the ordinary. Ning Yao quickened his pace, walked side by side with him, and couldn't help asking, "Chen Pingyan, are you alright?" Chen Pingyan shook his head and said, "It's okay. I know some things. That's it. There's no way. There's no way." The young man has never read books, so he doesn't know what that sentence means. If you put it another way, it's called the time when manpower will eventually run out. Ning Yao suddenly stopped in her tracks, and when the young man turned around in doubt, she pointed to the red mark on her brow. "I know you're curious, but I'm too embarrassed to ask. I might as well tell you the truth. This is my Ning Yao's assassin. The old ape of Zhengyang Mountain is powerful, isn't he? It makes you and me worse than a bereaved dog, right? But in my acupoint between the eyebrows, there is a 10th birthday gift from my mother, which is my life, as long as it appears. Don't say that the old ape is gonna die. It's just..." Having said this, the girl cut off the conversation and skipped directly. The reason why I tell you this is that I want to tell you that the world is very big. Don't underestimate yourself. And don't be discouraged. Haven't you already practiced martial arts? Why don't you even practice swordsmanship together? Chen Pingyan asked. "You can teach swordsmanship?" Ning Yao said confidently. "I am very talented. I learned swords very early, and my realm climbed very fast, but I can't teach others swordsmanship at all." Chen Pingyan scratched his head. Ning Yao thought for a while, and said sternly, "Even if I wanted to give you that flying sword, it would not agree. And I also do not want to insult it like this, in my hometown. I think there are spiritual swords in the world, and they are all I'm a fellow of my generation." Ning Yao finally took off the snow-white scabbard from his waist. "But I can give you this scabbard." Chen Pingyan was confused. "Why?" Ning Yao patted Chen Pingyan on the shoulder vigorously, and said earnestly, "I even have the scabbard. Is it still far from the sword immortal?" Chen Pingyan foolishly took the empty scabbard and said dumbfounded, "What did you say?" Ning Yao strode forward. At that time, the girl only felt that she had done an extremely unrestrained thing, and that was it. Chen Pingyan carefully carried the scabbard, thinking where would he go to find a sword? Before Chen Pingyan led Ning Yao to a multicolored statue, he was about a head taller than the young and strong man. Originally, he had 3 pairs of arms, but now only the fist arm at the top is left, which is raised high, and the one at the bottom, shake hands arm. The reason why one arm can shake hands, it turns out that the 10 fingers of the idol are intertwined, so even if the other arm is cut off at the shoulder level, the palm and wrist still have to be left. The multicolored clay statue is a god in armor, with a big beard, strong armor, continuous scales, 2 bead lines on the edge of the armor, and the beads are full of particles. In other words, it's really the difference between Jigui and Granny Ma. The statue was stepped on a square black stone pedestal, compared with the headless statue that the 2 of them were under the fence last night. Although this painted statue had many broken arms and modeled painted sculptures, it still showed a high-spirited look. Spirit? The most important thing is the waist and abdomen of the clay statue. The hands are intertwined, and the posture is extremely strange. Ning Yao saw the clue at a glance, understood why Chen Pingyan brought himself here in a hurry, nodded and said, "It is indeed somewhat like the stand-up fist on the Shanshan manual, but it is a bit different from the sword furnace on the boxing manual." Different. Ning Yao thought for a moment and asked, "Can you find the rest of the broken arms nearby?" Chen Pingyan squatted on the ground, shook his head regretfully and said, "I have searched and found nothing. It is estimated that they have been trampled by the children who came here to hide and seek. After so many years, these earth gods and mud bodhisattvas, I guess what hardships are there? I've eaten them all. Look at this one. The tallest fist, the wrist is missing a large piece, and there are many cracks next to it. It's obviously made by people using slingshots or stones, the children in the town all in this way. The more adults are not allowed to come here to play, the more they like to sneak here to catch crickets and dig wild vegetables, especially when it snows every year. There are often dozens of people playing snowball fights here. It is very lively. After playing crazy, what is there to care about? When I was a child, I liked to compare and see who climbed higher, and some people liked to climb on top of the statue to urinate. Who urinated farther than who? So you think, after each year, there is no complete, in fact, when I was a child. I had a few wooden statues. Later, I heard that some lazy people thought it was too tiring to go up the mountain to chop wood, so they set their sights on them. When winter started, they secretly took them home and chopped them into wood. Well, burned. The young man kept muttering there, feeling a little sad. At that time, I was disliked by Old Man Yao and had no comprehension to burn the kiln. So I rushed to the mountain to burn charcoal. If I knew someone in the town did this, I must persuade me. Really, no. I can promise to help him chop wood. Although the earth and wood immortal mud bodhisattva, although he never manifests his spirit, he is still a bodhisattva immortal. But he was chopped into firewood. How can such an immoral thing be done? The focus of Ning Yao and Chen Ping'an at the moment is completely different. Ning Yao held his chin in one hand and held his elbow in the other. His eyes were full of brilliance. And he slowly said, if I'm not wrong, the sword furnace of your family's boxing manual was born out of this, but it's not what you see now. These hands, but the pair of arms in the middle of the Taoist spirit official statue, are the sword furnaces that were pinched out by the disappearing hands. Although I don't know why the person who wrote the boxing score only chose one, and there was no choice. Now we see this gesture, but I can be sure that the sword furnace, or the Lingguan finger and sword, may be different in size. Chen Ping'an was confused. But he did not forget to retort and remind, the boxing manual belongs to Gu Kan, and I will keep it for you. Ning Yao didn't bother with Chen Ping'an. He stretched his finger to the sword stove shelf of the Taoist priest and explained, did you see, in the boxing manual, the tail finger of the right hand is protruding, and here are the 9 fingers that are entangled, encircled, and each other. Buckle. Only one index finger of the left hand is stretched out, and it stands out. The purpose is to pinch the finger into a sword art, and finally use it to nourish the index finger. Ning Yao said to himself, I have been in your world for many years, and I have also seen many 4 heavenly kings in temples, and various Taoist priests. This clay statue. Chen Ping waited quietly for the following, but he didn't get an answer after waiting for a long time, so he could only ask, is there anything strange? Ning Yao nodded and said solemnly, it's the shortest. The boy who was squatting on the ground didn't say anything, just gave her a thumbs up. Ning Yao turned his head and asked, have you ever seen a statue of a Taoist priest that is taller than your Piyun mountain? Of course, I haven't seen it before. Chen Ping'an was stunned for a while, then asked in confusion, is Peiyunshan from our side? Ning Yao suddenly explained, it's the highest mountain here, a long time ago. It is said that there was a master who had attained the Tao and buried a side of the heavenly master's seal on the side of Piyun mountain to suppress the heaven and earth here. Dragon spirit. Chen Ping'an's eyes lit up. Do you know the approximate location? Can we dig? Ning Yao said with a smile. Why? Do you want to dig and sell it? Chen Ping'an, who was exposed to the truth, smiled slightly and said frankly, it doesn't have to be sold for money, as long as it is a good thing and a valuable item. It is good to keep it at home as a family heirloom. Ning Yao volleyed his finger at the guy who had lost money, and said angrily, if you can start a sect in the future, I guess there is a sect master like you who swallows mud and manages the house well. And his disciple Kaching is sure. I don't have to worry about food and clothing all my life. Just lie down and enjoy happiness. Chen Ping'an didn't think so far. As for the establishment of a sect, he couldn't understand it. He stood up and asked, no matter how big or small, is it a kind of sword furnace in front of you? Ning Yao nodded and said, the big and small sword stoves are divided into left and right hands. The real nourishment is definitely not the index finger of the left hand and the tail finger of the right hand, but the upstream all the way until... When Ning Yao said this, she closed her eyes and concentrated. She didn't even need to pinch and stand. She could feel her heart. After opening her eyes, she bent her fingers and pointed to 2 places on the back of her head, namely the jade pillow and Tianju. The 2 orifice points are indeed more suitable places to warm and nourish the flying sword of life. She smiled and said, the sword stove in the left hand corresponds to this place, and the right hand points here. Chen Ping'an said blankly, Miss Ning, I've always wanted to ask, this sword stove is said to be a stand-up for boxing, but the fingers are twisting and twisting like this? What does this have to do with practicing boxing? Can you increase your strength? Ning Yao was a little dumbfounded. If Ning Yao had to explain martial arts or the way of cultivation in detail, it would be too embarrassing for her, not to mention asking her to tell how the big and small pits and hurdles were successfully overcome along the way. After all, for Ning Yao himself, do these most boring truths still need to be said? Isn't it natural to be familiar with it? So the girl raised her face and taught the boy, if you don't have the realm, you can say it for nothing. Why do you ask so many questions? Just bury your head and practice hard. Why? Can't bear the hardship. Chen Ping'an was suspicious and said cautiously, Miss Ning, is that really the case? Ning Yao put his hands around his chest, his face full of righteous expressions, and asked back, otherwise. Chen Ping'an stopped asking about the matter, and looked up at the painted statue that Ning Yao called the spiritual official of the Taoist sect, and said, this is the god of Daochang Lu and his family. Ning Yao said helplessly, what do you mean by Taoist Lu and their immortals? First, Taoism. Although it has a family name, it is definitely not the family of the people in your small town. The Taoism is far beyond your imagination. Even I don't know if there are Taoist priests in the Taoist sect, or how many branches there are. I just heard from my father that the ancestral court is divided into 4 towers, the north and the south. Forget it. Telling you this is playing the piano to the cow? Second, The gods and gods, although I'm used to reciting together. Even ordinary people all over the world do this. In the final analysis, gods and immortals take different paths. Let me give an example. People fight for one breath and Buddha fights for a stick of incense. Listen to this sentence. Have you been? Chen Ping'an nodded and said, in the past, Granny Ma in Xinghua Lane often quarreled with his mother Gu Chang, and I can always hear this sentence. At this time, Ningyao had some hints of the country. Buddhists fight for a stick of incense. Why do they want to fight? Because gods really need incense. Without incense, gods will gradually weaken and eventually lose their boundless mana. The reason is very simple. It's like a person who doesn't eat whole grains for several days. Where does the strength come from? Why does the secular court want officials from all over the world to ban prostitution temples? The fear is that the incense in the world will be cluttered, making some people who should not be gods or something sit on the gods. Take a step back and say that even if they become gods without authorization, they are naturally good people, willing to shade the local people year after year and never go beyond the rules of heaven and earth. But for emperors and monarchs who claim to be real dragons, these promiscuous temples that are not sealed by the imperial court are the feng shui on the side of the disaster, which is tantamount to the separation of the feudal towns, weakening the luck of the dynasty, and the act of digging the heels of the wall, because it will shorten the number of years of the country. So how can others sleep on the side of the couch? As for immortals, it's very simple. 9 times out of 10 you see foreigners. Even the old ape in Zhengyang Mountain is half an immortal. He walks on the avenue by himself and climbs the mountain step by step, the mountain leading to immortality. People who practice are also called qi cultivators, and what they practice is called cultivating immortals or cultivating truth. Chen Ping'an asked, so is this Taoist spiritual official a god or a fairy? According to Miss Ning, it should be regarded as a fairy in Taoism, right? Ning Yao's face was solemn. He shook his head gently, and did not continue to reveal the secret. She frowned suddenly. A stone shot inexplicably and smashed heavily on the fist of the statue of the spirit official above its head, smashing a lot of debris down. Ning Yao waved his hand to disperse the mud and dust above his head. Chen Ping'an stood up, following Ning Yao's line of sight. He turned his head to look, and saw an unexpected figure. There was a swarthy, slender, short boy, squatting on a fallen statue in the distance, throwing stones and catching them with one hand. Chen Ping'an turned around and stood side by side with Ning Yao, and said softly, his name is Ma Kuchuan. He is the grandson of Granny Ma in Xinghua Lane, a very strange person who has never liked to talk since he was a child. I met him in the stream last time. Ma Kuchuan also took the initiative to talk to me. He obviously knew that the snake gallstone was very valuable. The young man named Ma Kuchuan stood up and continued to weigh the stone. Cheo Ningyao and Chen Ping'an smiled brightly, and said straight to the point. If I go to the Lee House on Fulu Street, I will tell the old ape in Zhengyang Mountain to find it. You too. I think you can get a bag of money no matter what. But as long as you give me 2 bags of money, I will pretend that I haven't seen anything. I agreed in advance. It's just business. Don't think about killing people. There are so many immortals and bodhisattvas on the ground watching us. Be careful of retribution. Annoyed, Ning Yao was about to speak, but Chen Ping'an grabbed his arm. He stepped forward and asked Ma Kuchuan in a deep voice, if I'm willing to give money, can you really not say it? Ma Kuchuan was stunned for a moment, as if he did not expect that this young girl would be so easy to talk, and they actually started a business with him. But he was too lazy to continue acting. He took out a gorgeous and expensive money bag, threw it on the ground, and said with a smile, I already got paid at Lee's house, but I'm not doing it for the money. Ping'an, Song Jixin's next door neighbor, right? If you want to blame, you can blame the guy next to you. It's so annoying. She broke a lot of people's big things yesterday. The teenager twitched the corners of his mouth and pointed at himself. Like me. Chen Ping'an looked around. Ma Kuchuan looked at Ning Yao and said with a smile, don't worry. That old ape has something to deal with temporarily. I will take this opportunity to ask you for something. You know what it is, right? Ning Yao sneered and said, be careful if you take your life, you will lose your life. Ma Kuchuan said happily, you are not my daughter-in-law. What are you worried about? Chen Ping'an couldn't imagine. How could anyone think that such a ghostly guy is a fool? Ning Yao's face was gloomy. He touched Chen Ping'an's shoulder and reminded softly, I don't know why Fei Jing can't get in when he is around here. Ma Kuchuan turned his eyes slightly and grinned at Chen Ping'an. Yesterday, the battle on the roof was very exciting, and I happened to see it. Oh, by the way, you can take off the sandbag tied to your calf, otherwise you are chasing, not mine. Chen Ping'an really squatted down and slowly rolled up his trousers. His eyes kept on Ma Kuchuan. It was not until this time that Ning Yao was surprised to find that Chen Ping'an's trousers had a round sandbag tied around his calf. Chen Ping'an explained to Ning Yao, when I was very young, Grandpa Yang of the Yang family shop once told me not to take it down even if I died. It was originally intended to be the 4th breath to deal with the old ape, but now I think about it, it's almost the same, because I always feel that this guy named Ma Kuchuan is as dangerous as the old ape. Ma Kuchuan gently jumped off the statue, glanced at the heroic girl in a dark green robe, and said to himself, I thought I would meet the first enemy of the Great Tao when I left the town, but I didn't expect that. It happened so quickly. It's really hard to stop it if luck comes. Ning Yao suddenly asked Chen Ping'an. That guy also gave the ox's tail when he was a child. Chen Ping'an stood up, stomped his feet gently, left and right feet several times, seriously thought about Miss Ning's question. and replied, Mother Ma is very rich, so I remember the scalper from Ma Kushuan's family with an exceptional body shape. Big! The tail of the ox is very scary. When Chen Ping'an stood up, Ma Kushan squatted down again, grabbed a handful of stones and put it in his left hand. In the end, the boy from Mudbottle Lane and the boy from Xinghua Lane, two peers, confronted each other from a distance.